there's a need for a new world order, but it has different characteristics in different parts of the world.
The thing the men behind the curtain want is a conscious, informed public capable of critical thinking, which is why a continually fraudulent zeitgeist is output via religion, the mass media, and the educational system. They seek to keep you in a distracted, naive bubble, and they are doing a damn good job of it. In 2005, an arrangement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States was made. This arrangement, unannounced to the public, unregulated by Congress, merges the United States, Mexico, and Canada into one entity, erasing all borders. It's called the North American Union. You might want to ask yourself why you've never heard of this. In fact, there is only one mainstream reporter who's actually heard of and has had the courage to cover this issue.
The Bush administration's open borders policy and its decision to ignore the enforcement of this country's immigration laws is part of a broader agenda. President Bush signed a formal agreement that will end the United States as we know it, and he took the step without approval from either the U.S. Congress or the people of the United States.
It's a deal that few have even heard of.
It's being done again by very few people at the very top on behalf of the investment class, but the working class of people, political officials across our country, from communities, from cities and so forth, they don't know anything about this.
This isn't some trade agreement. It is a total removal of sovereignty from these countries, which will also result in a completely new currency called the Amero.
Fall. Apart from that, I think one thing people who are dollar-based need to focus on is the Amero. That's the one thing that nobody's talking about, but I think it's going to have a big impact on everybody's life in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. The Amero is the proposed new currency for the North American community, which is being developed right now between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico to make a borderless community, much like the EU, and the dollar, Canadian dollar, U.S. dollar, and the Mexican peso replaced by the Amero.
By default of this agreement, the American Constitution will eventually be obsolete. You would think that a situation like this would be on the cover of every major newspaper. That is until you realize that the people who are behind this movement are the same people behind the mainstream media, and you are not told what you're not supposed to know. The North American Union is the same concept as the European Union, the African Union, and the soon-to-be Asian Union, and the same people are behind all of them. And, when the time is right, the North American Union, the European Union, the African Union, and the Asian Union will be merged together, forming the final stages of a plan these men have been working on for over 60 years. A one-world government.
Well, would all the violence and conflict in the Middle East evaporate if Israel simply ceased to exist? My next guest says Israel is not only breaking Jewish law with its military strikes against the terrorist group Hezbollah, but that the state of Israel itself should not even exist in the first place. What you may find more shocking is that the person saying that is a rabbi. He is Yisrael Weiss from Jews United Against Zionism. Rabbi.
Yes.
Pretty strong words.
Yes, but this is the view that was shared by all religious leaders throughout, the last 100 years when Zionism was, the whole movement of Zionism was created. The concept, the ideology of transforming Judaism from spirituality, a religion, into a materialism, a nationalistic goal to have a piece of land. All the rabbinical authorities said this is antithetical with what Judaism is all about, expressly forbidden in the Torah, because we are in exile by God.
So you shouldn't have a state. You shouldn't have a country. You shouldn't have a government?
We shouldn't have a state. We should be living amongst all the nations as the Jews were doing for 2,000 years, as loyal citizens, people who are serving God, emulating God with compassion. And the Talmud states clearly that if we will attempt to breach these oaths of God, of trying to leave God, it will just bring to this death and catastrophic results for the Jews. We find that since the inception of Zionism, the state of Israel, there's a river, an endless river of suffering for the Jews and non-Jews alike. And contrary to what people believe, that there's a religious conflict, we have been living for hundreds of years amongst the Muslims and Arab communities without any UN human rights groups to watch.
So life, let me ask you this, Rabbi. Was life better for the Jews prior to the creation of the Jewish state of Israel?
100%. In Palestine, we have the testimony of the Jewish community living there and other lands that they were living in harmony, and they pleaded with the United Nations. In the documents, we have the chief rabbi of Jerusalem said, we do not want a Jewish state. The Muslims, Christians, and the Jewish inhabitants were ignored with the creation of the state, this political
Nevertheless,
state.
you might not have had a country per se, but you were not a stranger to being abused or slaughtered over the millenniums, right? And particularly as recently as 50,
right.
60 years ago.
There is an issue of being killed because of anti-Semitism, and then there's another issue where you antagonize and you create your anti-Semitism through Zionism. Doing that, in other words, it's not a free-for-all. You'll knock out your neighbor's windows and then yell anti-Semitism.
All right, now I know you are an Orthodox Jew. What do traditional Jews think of that position?
Well, this is and this was the mainstream view of Jewish people worldwide, whether it was...
well, I know it was.
Yes.
It isn't now. So what do they tell you now?
Well, what they've done is let's just talk about the religious point of view, because we're talking about the Judaism, not people who have left the folds of Judaism.
Right.
The Jewish view is that the mainstream view would be that, true, we shouldn't be having a state, but once it's created, the Zionist propaganda that the Arabs want to throw every Jew into the ocean, and there's an ingrained hate against the Jews, which they've convinced many Jews to believe. This is why they are fearful of returning the land.
Well, you can't blame them, right? I mean, you have the president of Iran who says the Holocaust never existed, and if he had his druthers, he'd destroy Israel and all the Jews.
That's also patently false. He has a Jewish community in Iran, and they haven't murdered them when they had the opportunity.
So you don't take him at his word that he would try to kill Jews?
He would want to the dismantling of the political state of Israel. In fact, we went a whole group of rabbis this last year to visit Iran, and we were taken up by the leaders. We met with the vice president. He was in Venezuela at the time. We met with the religious leaders. All of them stated unequivocally that they don't have a conflict with the religion.
So as long as Israel exists, Rabbi, you think you're just itching for trouble, right?
The Jews are suffering, the Palestinians, the Lebanese are suffering. We pray for the speedy and peaceful dismantlement of the state.
It's interesting, Rabbi, you don't hear that view often. Thank you for stopping by. Very good seeing you.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, fierce fighting in the...
uncover the worst and most incredible criminal organization and conspiracy in human history. And they have put this conspiracy together over hundreds of years, centuries it's taken them to get this kind of control. They designed these kinds of warfares that we experienced in the last century as a means to this control, and they are willing to do anything to meet their goals. The local group that's running the world, and make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, they are a very dangerous group of people. They are evil beyond anything you can wrap your brain around. I've told you this before, they have murdered millions, hundreds of millions. Don't let them succeed, please. This is really the fight for the future of humanity, and that's how important it is. How did they build the Rothschilds into such a powerful force financially and politically? And were they able to buy the Bank of England and buy the European Central Bank and the Federal Reserve? And how they've positioned themselves to control world money supplies to the detriment of every single breathing, living creature on the planet except themselves. They have a Messiah picked out, and they're waiting to announce it. This stuff is real. The money they've spent is in the trillions. Much of it has come from the public purse of the United States and Europe. They are working day and night to bring on this mess that's coming, and it is the introduction of a new Messiah. Their Messiah is going to be a figurehead that is housed in Jerusalem, and they are going to try to set up their one world government through this. In fact, their documents stating these facts have gone back generations. But how much do we need to stand for before we stand up and say that is enough? When is enough enough? When is it enough for you to say, I've had it now? We're going to tell everybody. We're going to scream it from the rooftops. We're going to ignore these morons who want rapture. I love this world. I love living. I love the people that I've met in my lifetime and in my travels, and I want us to be at what kind of world could we have without these people controlling it?